Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a Santa Claus cosplay build. This is going to be a level 80 dexterity build, and we're going to be setting this up to be somewhat optimal for PvP while still looking like Santa Claus. To really get the full value out of the pun of this build, we're going to need to stick to the claw type weapons, so we'll be switching between the Bloodhound Claw as well as the Hookclaws. The Bloodhound Claws are going to be cold infused since that's a little bit more cosplay-ish to have the frostbite damage. And then the Hook Claws are going to be mostly for emergency situations within these invasions, so we'll pull them out when we need to do some burst damage. These are going to be lightning infused, which is going to be scaled with dexterity, so they'll be a little bit stronger. And then they're also going to have Horrorloo's Earthshaker on them, just because that's really good turn and burn type Ash of War. As for the Bloodhound Claws, we're going to switch between a couple different Ashes of War. I landed on Quickstep being my favorite just because these have poor range, and you're also going to be able to use Quickstep backstabs, which are just a lot of fun. But I also put on Endure and Royal Knight's Resolve. Those two are both pretty solid choices. Endure is a little bit hard to make work just because so many people use status procs in this game, so if you get hit with a status proc, you're likely going to be poise broken regardless of your Ash of War. And then Royal Knight's Resolve is a pretty solid choice if you do jumping attacks a lot. So you could throw on the Claw Talisman and use the Royal Knight's Resolve buff, and you'll get pretty decent damage coming out. As for the armor, you're going to have a couple different choices. I use the Sage Hood for the screenshots in this opening because I think it looks most like the Santa hat. However, I didn't realize that until right about now. So for most of this, I use the Merchant's Hood, which looks also like a Santa hat, but I think the Sage Hood is a little bit better in terms of conveying Santa Claus. This is pretty optional. You could do something that doesn't make your character look as much like Santa Claus, but the name of the game with this build is going to be to have high poise for everything other than the hood. So the Fire Prelate armor is going to be very poisey, and then I use Bullgoat stuff for everything else, and that brings us to 79 poise, which is a solid breakpoint. As for the talismans, we'll have the usual stat boosting talismans such as Erdtree's Favor, Greatjar's Arsenal, and Crimson Amulet Medallion. These are going to boost HP, equip load, stamina, that type of thing. And then I'll be switching around for the first talisman slot quite a bit. So if I have Quick Step on and I'm going for backstabs, I'm going to be using the Dagger Talisman. If I think that I'm going to be doing poise trades with something like Endure, I'll use the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia since I plan to get a lot of successive attacks in. And then if I'm going for a turn and burn situation with an Ash of War like Hurloo's Earthshaker, then I'll go for the Shard of Alexander. Because the claw weapon types have such short range, you also may want to rely on parrying a little bit. That's a great way to get burst damage. Especially if you're having trouble trading with something like katana or a straight sword. Being able to parry and pull out a Misericorde or a Buckler, that both fits on this build with the 28 endurance and these talismans. So I recommend that. It works for my playstyle, but it's definitely not necessary. I also wanted to briefly go over the different tiers that I use throughout the showcase. So I landed on the Dexterity Knot as well as the Crimson Bubble tier. The Crimson Bubble tier I pretty much always leave on regardless of what build I'm running, but the Dexterity Knot I did switch around. I did try the Leaden Hard tier, which is great for poise trades. So if your opponent is expecting to poise break you, you can usually get in a bunch of quick R1s and usually do quite a bit of damage. So that's a great option for sure. And then if you're using the Frost Infusion or the Lightning Infusion, you could boost the magic or the lightning with either of these two tiers. And those are both great options depending on the build that you're running. The moveset for this build is pretty straightforward. It's going to be a combination of staggered attacks and in unison attacks. The running heavy is going to be one of those staggered attacks that I find pretty useful. The running light is also pretty solid since it is a staggered attack. If you can land both hits, you're going to be doing decent damage. You're also going to apply your status effects a little bit faster. So we do have Frost buildup and Blood Loss since Blood Loss is on the weapon by default. So that's a nice pro to this. If you can get off a few attacks at the same time, do some poise trades, that'll be pretty solid approach to using this weapon successfully. Also, if you can get off an R1 and then reverse backstep, you'll usually get a roll catch there as well. So it's not a great move set given the range, but you do have the potential to do a lot of damage with your status procs, and especially with high poise armor. If you're poise trading, a lot of the times you'll be successful in how much damage you do versus your opponent. Alright, jumping into this first invasion, we've got a host seemingly by themselves, but then a phantom that's abusing the Ash of War from Moog's Spear to use the blood loss buildup that really can kill you pretty quick if you don't get away fast enough. Then I see that they've got curved swords, so I pull out my parry shield and am able to one-shot them with my Misericordia. So that ends up feeling pretty nice. Whenever I see dual curved swords, the running attack is really easy to telegraph. So I always pull out my parry shield, and if you're successful, it's pretty great, but if you miss, then you usually get hit with more blood loss. So it's kind of a high risk, high reward situation. This next invasion is a little bit odd. We have a phantom with dual daggers, which is a setup you don't usually see, and they also choose not to heal, so I'm not sure if they were out of health or just didn't feel like they needed any more, but they really just kind of keep swinging at it with their daggers, and or maybe going for the rot buildup. I think those are the scorpion daggers that have innate rot, which is kind of cool. I definitely respect that, but eventually they do go down since they aren't healing and are taking a lot of trades. And then now that it's just one host, I go for a quick step backstab, and I find these to be a lot of fun. So they're pretty much the main reason I have quick step on this weapon. I believe I also have the talisman to boost crit damage, so it does make sense to do that. And I continue to mess around with quick step a little bit more. Go for backstabs, but really just that first one is all I get. And then once I stop going for the quick step backstabs, I decide to go for an extended roll catch chain. So I do get the ravioli step, followed up by a jumping attack, and then my weapon just comes out a little bit faster there, and I'm able to finish off the host. This next invasion is going to be another example where we've got a host with dual curved swords, and I decide to pull out my buckler. Really just knowing the parry timing of the running L1 is going to be so useful, because people with dual curved swords love to go for it, and the windup is long enough that you can usually parry a little bit early, or maybe a little bit earlier than you think, and it'll usually be successful. I really love invading in the Black Knife Catacombs. Any of these dungeons that have these falling guillotines are really just a lot of fun. Being able to get some vertical movement along with your horizontal movement throughout the map just makes these invasions really interesting, in my opinion. So we start off here and get a jumping attack off of the guillotine, which just worked out really well. I'm surprised they kind of walked into it. I now realize it's a 3v1, so I'm a little bit more hesitant. They do have Moon Veil and Rot Breath, as well as Horaloo's Earthshaker, so those three things combined are potentially devastating. So I'm trying to just keep my health up as much as possible. I go into my menu to get out the Rot Blouses and do take some more damage, so things are not going super well here at the beginning. I finally get the blouses taken care of, and the phantoms aren't being too aggressive, so that's pretty helpful. At this point, I'm really just trying to look out for the Rot Breath and make sure that I have enough time and space to heal. I do wonder if I'm able to bait them in, potentially isolate them, but they all just wait up here and then start pulling out the Rot Breath again. So I hop back down, I take a little while to regroup and adjust my weapons. I pull out these claws that do a little bit more damage and start going for some poise trades. And then the guillotine takes care of that one phantom, which was pretty nice. The host is actually up top at this time, and this next phantom has very little health, so I'm able to take them out. Then it does take me a little while to get on top of the guillotine. Trying to jump on it is definitely not the play. Letting it fall down and then walking on top of it is a much better way to get up there. And then I start going for the host. I'm not sure what was going on, if they were in their menu or something, or thought they couldn't be hit up there, but they aren't moving at first. So I try to start going for some quick step backstabs, or just mess around a little bit. They're pretty low on health, so I don't feel like it's such a high pressure situation. Eventually, I quick step maybe a little bit too much, and then just go for some R1s and finish them off. This next invasion is going to be a nice little showcase for the Endure Ash of War. We do have a Phantom using Moon Veil, so we're able to dodge that Ash of War and then get in a nice jumping attack, which applies quite a bit of status proc, and then I believe the bubbles killed them at the end. But then we have the host using claws also, so I anticipate that they're going to be using a lot of quick R1s, so I use the Endure, and I'm able to out-trade them and do more damage. Here we have an invasion where the Phantom's not really paying much attention and maybe not appreciating the full amount of damage that the claws can do, so they keep spamming with their twin blades and then just get absolutely shredded by a couple quick R1s. And then we do have another blue that comes along. This one didn't have too much health, so they get the blood loss proc and go down pretty fast. And then we have to take care of the host, who is pretty intent on running. I fade through just a little bit there because it's just me chasing them for a while. We do have this Iron Virgin that comes in, and we're trying to avoid that a little bit. We get a little bit more damage, but the range of these is just such an issue, so we eventually go for a couple free tosses there and manage to get the last 42 bits of damage right before we get hit. This next one was another pretty funny invasion. I'm not 100% sure what was going on with this host, but they get quick step backstab real quick. That was one of the more laggy ones that I've seen. Usually the backstab animation doesn't connect if there's that much delay, but they decide to jump into the lava, which is an odd decision. Generally when a host goes somewhere that I don't like, I try not to follow them and change my tactics. So here I pull out the jar cannon, and they really just stay in the lava, taking damage and getting shot with a jar cannon, so it's definitely an odd decision. And then eventually they just jump and yeah, that's it. This next invasion is going to be a nice example of spacing, timing, and poise trades. So once the PvE gets involved, I'm able to isolate this Phantom with the Cypher Swords, and I try to space their attacks, but I also think that their swords are going to be a good candidate for poise trades. So once I get the status proc, it becomes just a matter of chase down, and I try to stagger my R1s a little bit so that they don't align with when I think my opponent's going to roll. Then I let the host finish off the PvE just to make it a little bit more of a fair fight at this point. And I'm just going to be trying to space their katanas since they do have quite a bit of range. And I'll utilize my quick step just to get around some of their attacks. They eventually go for a Piercing Fang, and I'm able to strafe this and get a quick step backstab and then get a wake up with the fully charged R2, which does quite a bit of damage as well as triggering some status procs. I'm going to go ahead and let the rest of these invasions just kind of speak for themselves. But I would say the name of the game with claw weapons or short-range weapons in general is just to have your spacing down, have your timing down, and know when there's an opening for you to get in there, and then be able to assess if it's going to be an advantageous poise trade for you. So smaller weapons, or if you're going to stagger after a couple R1s, are going to be good options, and try to keep an eye out for the level of poise that your opponent has. Somebody in full bull goat is going to most likely win a trade against you, and you won't be able to stagger them. So try to practice these different aspects of the weapon class, and you should be successful after a little while. if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. This channel is really growing pretty consistently now, and every subscriber, every minute of watch time, it all just adds up to help the channel grow, and I really appreciate all of it so much. If you do have any build ideas, as always, I'm open to anything new and something weird, something fun. I'm happy to try to make it viable in PvP. So yeah, just let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.